listening to My World and welcome to it. I am your host, Rex Owens. In this hour program, I invite listeners to share my world of the arts. I talk with a variety of artists, including writers, playwrights, musicians, composers, and actors. I don't share interview questions with my guests prior to the broadcast to ensure the interview is spontaneous and authentic. My guests share their stories about living a creative life. This program is live streamed at www.Sun Prairie Media Center from her CD, Released from the Heart, and the song is called Old Friends. This morning I'm talking with Wisconsin author Jeff Nanina. Drawing upon careers in law enforcement, conservation, and a passion for our natural resources, Jeff has gone from writing police reports, scientific papers, outdoor humor, and feature stories to weaving together mysteries that keep readers wondering who is on the right side of the law in the small town of Muskie Falls. His first book, Figure 8, and his second book, Northern Mysteries Book Series, was a 2020 Midwest Book Award winner. Spider Lake is the second book in the series, and Book 3 is in the works. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Rex.
So, Jeff, let's start out with, I've read about your career, which is quite illustrious, by the way, and I read that you started out as a police officer, a canine officer. And how did you get to that path?
It's actually when I decided on going into law enforcement, it was absolutely the right choice for me. I had an experience when I was a young man, actually a little boy, with a police officer. And, the story is a great story. What happened is that two police officers, recruits at the time, lived in a two-flat next to my family home. One lived upstairs, one lived downstairs with their families. I was about 10 years old and I was playing outside, and all of a sudden police cars started showing up at their house. And being a curious 10-year-old, I walked up to one of the officers and I said, "Why are all the police cars here?" And he said, "My son, Andy, is missing." Andy was about, I'm guessing, 4 or 5. And he said, "And we're all going to look for him." And I said, "Can I look for Andy too?" He said, "Sure, Jeff, you can look for Andy. Go ahead." And they sent me on my way. Well, I started going through the alleys and the back ways in our neighborhood, and sure enough, I found Andy. And I carried him back with me all the way to their house. And the police officer presented me with a junior police officer's badge. And I would say I decided right then and there that that's what I wanted to be.
That is one fantastic story, Jeff. Excellent, excellent. And so how long were you a police officer?
I had police service with different agencies for about 14 years.
Wow. Well, and then I read that next you changed direction and began working as a conservationist with a concentration on wetlands. Where does your interest in conservation come from?
I would say that my dad spent a lot of time in the outdoors with me and my 4 brothers. And as a matter of fact, it was really a family affair. We went outdoors and did things. Although we lived in the city, we'd go to farms in northern Dane County and actually all over Wisconsin. We'd go visit places and spend a lot of time outdoors. And I was fascinated by the outdoors. But when it became time for a change from law enforcement, I had always been very interested in conservation, even during my law enforcement career. As a matter of fact, I even worked part-time as a conservation warden. And at the time, wetland restoration was in its infancy. And the idea that we could take back and restore the landscape, to me, was absolutely fascinating. The whole concept that we could do something to make the land better. And at the time, of course, we were, as we are now, and as we probably will be in the decades to come, in a land crisis. We had all sorts of people, all sorts of buildings, all sorts of projects, and they were encroaching on different types of natural habitats. So I pursued this, and when it came to restoring my first wetland, I did it on my farm, which is in Columbia County. And Rex, this may sound like baloney, but the truth is, I could not believe what happened. I could not believe that a lowly human being like myself could restore a wetland to some semblance of its former glory. And I never looked back.
I actually understand that, Jeff. That makes perfect sense to me.
And, and I'm glad it does, because to some people, they really don't understand it. But, and I was asked several times during the course of my career, how many wetlands have you restored? And the answer to that question is not enough.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And we started with projects, an acre in size. And the biggest one we ever did was in central Wisconsin, and it was well over 1,000 acres.
Wow.
And it was great, and it was timely, and it was something we needed to do. And this whole thing, the Leopold family really helped me through this entire process. I don't think I would have been as successful in wetland restoration had it not been for their support, particularly Nina Bradley, who was all of Leopold's daughter. Mm-hmm. But there was a portion in the Sand County Almanac and Leopold buys this worn-out farm in Sauk County.
Right.
And we had this whole concept that the land was endless. Farmers would farm it to death and then move on to the next one. Mm-hmm. Loggers would log all the trees off and move on to the next woodlot, and so on and so forth. And Leopold was talking about this whole thing of restoring the landscape. Can we restore it? Well, he went to the Arboretum with a bunch of grad students and restored a prairie there. And I think with 30 grad students, you could do just about anything with the workers. Mm-hmm. But I think that the farm he bought in Sauk County, which was worn out, blown out, drained farm, was a true test of his theories. I can preach to people about restoring the landscape, but can it be done? And who should undertake the task? And he decided it should be families, because that's who lives on these properties. Mm-hmm. And with his kids and his wife, they began the restoration of that farm and proved, in fact, that land restoration was possible. And what an exciting possibility.
Sure. Jeff, how did you learn how to restore a wetland?
Well, when I had started college in environmental studies, and then I went back and when I went to law enforcement, I was studying that. But I went back to try and get classes or find classes on wetland restoration, and there really weren't any. The first one I went to was in New York State, and it was clear to me that the practice of wetland restoration was problematic. We had an idea that all we had to do was put water on the landscape, and that meant digging a bomb crater in the middle of a cornfield, letting it fill with water, would be a wetland restoration. Of course, that's not the case. Then the Wisconsin Waterfowl Association came to me and said, here's what we have. We're raising money to restore wetlands. We're restoring these wetlands, and we're finding that for the first couple of years of the restored wetland, waterfowl, all sorts of migratory birds come and live in these wetlands, and it appears to be successful. But after 2 or 3 years, the usage goes down. Now, that just make any sense. So they asked me under a grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Foundation to go out in the field and figure out why weren't they working? Mm-hmm. And we looked at, I can't even tell you how many wetlands, natural wetlands, trained wetlands, restored wetlands. And pretty soon we realized that, in fact, it's best described like this. You know, you're driving by someplace and you see this wetland, and sometimes it's all in context. It looks like it's all the pieces of the puzzle are together. And you say, this belongs where it belongs. On the other hand, you can drive south towards Madison and you'll see excavated ponds in the middle of cornfields, and you'll say, oh, you know, there's water there, but it doesn't really belong there. And it was beginning of what we found, which was the ecosystem-based approach to restoration. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It was that the upland was as important to the wetland as the wetland was to itself. All these things needed to be integrated into the landscape in the same way that they had historically been. So instead of saying we want it to look like this, we said, let's see what the land looked like. And we began historic searches of the land histories, which are very much available in Wisconsin. And pretty soon, by using soils, hydrology, and doing all these things, we were getting pretty close to restoring these wetlands. And I've got to say that just the first ones we did immediately showed so much promise. And so that is where we went. And I was with the Wisconsin Waterfowl Association for over 20 years, over 25 years, I don't know how long, and restoring wetlands across the state.
Wow. When did you start writing for the Wisconsin Outdoor News?
Oh, I think I was doing feature stories for them for about the last 4 years. It was a lot of fun. The Outdoor News is like the newspaper for people who like the outdoors. And I did feature stories on individuals mostly that were in Wisconsin, and I really enjoyed it. And so it's about 4 years.
Okay. Well, do you have a background in journalism, or are you just a naturally good writer?
Well, I don't know that I'm a naturally good writer, but I don't have a background in journalism.
Okay.
I don't, but I enjoy writing. So there you go, Rex. The honest truth is, nobody knows why I do anything.
Well, you've been quite successful at doing it. I'll give you credit for that.
Well, once I like something, I want to follow it to its natural end.
Right, right. So did you work for the news, or were you a freelancer?
Well, I was a freelancer, and the editor of the Outdoor News is a good friend of mine, and they wanted to diversify. There's a lot of really special people in Wisconsin, and people who have their foothold in conservation. And we tell the stories of people who are well known or in the news all the time and things like that, but we don't always tell the stories of these people that are not. And yet they're so much a part of the fabric of our state. We had a guy who sent a letter to the Outdoor News, a one-page handwritten letter, and this is just within the last year. And he said to the editor, Dean Boritz, he said, I just want you to know that I just had a thought about how when I first got back from World War II, I went hunting on my family's farm, and I was carrying my rifle through the woods, and no one was shooting at me. And so the editor said, you should go talk to this guy. Well, he's 97 years old.
Wow.
And what a wonderful story. What a wonderful guy.
Sure.
And, a story that just needed to be told. And I just think it's my privilege when I'm offered that opportunity.
I understand that. And that's how I feel about interviewing people. So,
well, don't hang your hand on this one.
Yes, I am, sir. Because I share your love of conservation with you. I frankly came to it much later in life, but I'm there with you now. So, you created a program called Outdoor Adventure Days. Can you share with our audience what that program's about?
Yes. During the course of my wetland restoration, I really have a passion for kids and for learning. And there were opportunities that presented themselves where I could interact with kids. But one of the things that frustrated me was that kids were learning about environmental education inside. They were doing it from their desk, sitting, listening, and learning about our natural resources. Now, even though some people may disagree, the reality of it is our natural resources are everything to us. They sustain us. Without the land, we don't have any food to eat. Without clean water, we're gone. And and they should be introduced to those things in a way that will be memorable and give them the opportunity to actually interact. So working with actually the Wisconsin Waterfowl Association and the Fish and Wildlife Service, we developed this program, and it was simple as we could make it. We had outdoor classrooms for kids at a wetland that is in Columbia County. It's 148 acres. It's got prairie, it's got woods, it's got wetland, and it's got it all. And it's a beautiful site. And so we raised money, and we would go to teachers and say, if you want to take your kids on an outdoor classroom, we'll pay for the bus, we'll pay for the whole works. You guys just show up. And then experts in the field. You can't believe some of the people that showed up to teach these classes with these kids. And they'd get there, they'd come off the bus, and we would tell them to wear old clothes, and they'd get wet and muddy, and they had so much fun. But they so connected with the outdoors.
I just, they are starting to talk now about nature deficit, and I have to tell you, I have some grandchildren that fit into that category, and we make a special effort to get our kids outdoors and into the state parks and places like Oregon Marsh every chance we get, because they do love it. They really are attracted to it naturally.
Well, and even if they come to the outdoors kicking and screaming and bemoaning the loss of their iPad, once they get there, they find that our natural resources are fascinating.
Yes. Yes.
And so Outdoor Adventure Days, I think at last count we had about 8,700 kids.
Wow.
That went through Outdoor Adventure Days. And we had a ball. And I've got to say, the conservation professionals at the DNR, the Fish and Wildlife Service, other conservation organizations, the Leopold Foundation, the International Crane Foundation, they stepped up. They really stepped up, and they helped put this on. Even and being teachers in the classrooms, the kids would go to the prairie classroom and sit in the prairie, and they go to the wetland classroom and stomp around the water. And so it was a product of a lot of people and a lot of help.
Excellent, excellent. Jeff, Outdoor Life magazine named you one of the 25 most influential conservationists. How did you react to that recognition?
I could hardly believe it. I was shocked. I think there are people that were far more deserving of that than myself. But I was honored. And at that time, I was not only restoring wetlands, but I was working a lot in our state legislature and on the federal level to try and bring some common sense to our natural resources and implementation of landscape-based changes. And it was a time when we were really, trying to find balance. The natural resources is based on balance. How can we put this together? And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And what was even better is my dear friend George Meyer, who was the former DNR secretary, is now the executive director of the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. He was also picked. So there were a couple of us.
Sure.
And although I didn't go to the cocktail party in Florida.
Oh, you didn't?
No. I should have, but I was just busy doing what I'm doing.
Sure. Well, from everything that I have read, Jeff, it's an honor and a distinction that you have earned. So think of it that way.
Well, thank you.
So we need to pivot, though, now. And I tried to look very closely at your bio information, and I couldn't find anything about writing mystery. So when did you begin writing mystery?
Well, Rex, here's the story. So my family has been going up to a lake. My dad went grouse hunting in northern Wisconsin, in the Hayward area, with a friend of his one fall. They stayed at a work camp that was being converted into a resort. The guy who owned the work camp and his wife and daughter were working hard. And my dad said it was a beautiful place on a beautiful lake. And my dad said, hey, is there any chance I could bring my kids back here in the summer for a vacation? The guy said, that's exactly what I want to do. I want this to be a family place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was not yet born. So the next summer, my dad brought my two older brothers to this place on Spider Lake in Sawyer County, Wisconsin. That began a tradition that has lasted for 70 years.
Wow.
This was the 70th year. Well, one of the things we did as a family, and it was just a lot of fun, is we'd buy a case of mystery books written by a local Wisconsin author and pass them out, and everybody would read the books together, kind of like a family book club. Now, we wouldn't sit and read them together, but we'd say, yeah, what page are you on,
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen next? And it was a lot of fun. Well, at one point, this writer did not write a book, and so I did. I wrote Figure 8 and had it spiral bound and handed it out to my entire family. My wife saw the book as something more than just for the family, and as a result, it got published. But that's, Rex, it's just like restoring wetlands or going into police work. Who knows? I just did it, and I was happy to do it, and my family enjoyed it.
So you didn't do any, classes on writing or go to conferences or workshops or anything like that?
No, I didn't.
That is amazing.
Well,
so
go ahead.
Let me try to understand. So you wrote this as a book just for your family to read. So, and then from that point, it evolved into the book that we know now as the published Figure 8?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same book as I gave to my family.
Okay, interesting. So Um, Before your book was published, did you have, other than family members, did you have beta readers look at it to give you feedback about the book, anything like that?
Yeah, well, I had some. My barber read it. A friend of mine who was actually a writer for Road and Track magazine read it. My old police partner and his wife read it, but I had people read it. I just said, "Tell me what you think," and they all liked it.
Okay. So, did you have the book professionally edited before you had it published?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
we worked with Little Creek Press. They were recommended to us, and we talked to Kristen Mitchell there, and it was clear that that was a great fit for us. And working with my family and working with her and her staff, we put the book together, and it was great. You know, the best thing about it is you know, as a writer, I'm sure you know, I mean, it's hard when people try and change your text or try and change the meaning of your words.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not do that. What we did is we worked together to tell the story I wanted to tell.
That's excellent.
And it worked out well for us.
So how long did you work with them before the book was published?
About 3 months.
Oh, that's a short time. That's quick.
Yeah, about 3 months.
Okay.
And the first thing I asked them was I gave them a draft copy of the book, and I said, I don't want to write a book or try and publish a book that is no good. So I would appreciate it if I could hire you to read this, being a publisher, and tell me if it's no good, and then I'll abandon this effort.
That's a unique approach, Jeff.
And they got back to me within a few days and said, no, we really like it. And so we just continued on.
Okay. So what was your inspiration for the story in the mystery figure 8?
Well, in my lifetime, I have been blessed with a bunch of dear friends. They are an eclectic group of people from all walks of life. And this is a story of them. It is also a story of the reality of police work. It's also a story about the reality of environmentalism and the challenges we're facing. And the story just kind of flowed out of me.
Okay. How much did you draw on your career as a police officer to write the book?
Well, I drew heavily on that, but I also made absolutely sure that all of the law enforcement portions of the book were perfectly correct today.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want to do is write a book that includes detailed parts of police work and then have a bunch of cops read it.
Yeah, that can be dangerous, can't it?
They are born investigators.
Right.
And will find everything and anything that is wrong. And so I wanted to make sure. And I really think that research, you know, again, this investigative bent I have, I really enjoyed the research and asking questions about certain things and making sure that they were correct.
Sure. So, could you just share with us the overall story arc of your book, Figure 8?
Sure. How the story goes?
Yes.
Yes. It starts out with a police officer working in Madison, and he is sent to a call. You know, this whole concept of law enforcement officers right now, things are as challenging as they can be. Law enforcement officers are facing challenges like never before. Just on Monday of this week, I went to the funeral of a friend of mine, a Dane County Sheriff's deputy, who, in the course of his duties, was exposed to COVID-19, and he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
We have this whole idea about what people think law enforcement should be. I'm not going to comment on that, but I do think that people have to recognize that law enforcement officers are put in a difficult position. You know, they make sometimes they make decisions that are almost instantaneous, and they'll be examined forever. I'm not condoning misbehavior. I'm not condoning anything that someone would construe as inappropriate law enforcement techniques, I guess, or something. I don't. What I am pointing out is that things happen so quickly. And in this book, that's where we start. Something happens quickly. And I was talking to a group of people in northern Wisconsin, and a woman said to me, you know, I almost couldn't read that part of the book. And it's not graphic violence, but it is pretty close to reality. Mm-hmm. And she said it was so painful, but for the first time, she said, I understood what must go through the mind of a law enforcement officer. Mm-hmm. But you know, law enforcement officers have they're faced with post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, there's depression, all those things that kind of go along with the job. Most people do pretty well with it, but some people don't. Mm-hmm. And in this case, this guy, the main character in the book, John Cabrelli, he doesn't do very well with it. What happens is something that impacts the rest of his life and the lives of many others, and he does not do well with it. And soon he finds himself in a position with no way out. And law enforcement officers, as they tend to do, came to him. He'd been terminated from his job based on the incident, and they saved him. They helped him straighten himself out.
That sounds like a great story, Jeff.
Well, then he finds out that he has inherited a cabin in northern Wisconsin, a cabin he went to as a boy that was owned by his Uncle Nick and Aunt Rose, and they had passed away. Cabrelli had kind of lost touch with him because he was busy being a policeman. He was busy hanging out with other policemen. And when he got to this cabin, the healing process started. There is no one that can doubt that our natural resources are the true healers. We can heal by contacting our natural resources, swimming in the lake, fishing in a stream, hiking a trail, whatever it is. It's a healing thing. And it healed him. But in the northwoods of Wisconsin, there was treachery afoot, Rex. And John Cabrelli, he may not be a police officer anymore, but he's still an investigator at heart. Mm-hmm. And he found out that his Uncle Nick had died under suspicious circumstances. And he began the pursuit of the killer.
Excellent. Jeff, would you please read a selection from your book, Figure 8, for us?
I'd be glad to. This is Chapter 1, Hospital. A faint, polite knock on John's door let him know that someone was visiting. The nurses, doctors, and the maintenance guy never knocked. They just walked in. Most of the time, he didn't care. They were pumping enough pain medication into him to make him to seriously impact his ability to be concerned with his dignity, or reality for that matter. It also made it impossible to pee, which resulted in yet another personal assault. Only visitors knocked. He didn't get many visitors. Doctor's orders, enforced by Nurse B. Holterman, a very tough old girl with the bedside manner of a night shift jailer. She was probably over 100, and had clearly made her bones in a tent hospital in World War II, cutting off limbs. People had tried to get in to see him several times, but she scared them off, never to return. They were feeling bad for old John, but not bad enough to run the Nurse B. Holterman gauntlet. Today, John was getting a visitor, and Nurse Holterman had attempted to intercede, but finally relented. Probably based on everyone's unspoken assumption, John was on his way out. Even if he did survive, his probable future looked like something between plain bad and plain dismal. The knocker now had a face and a voice. A young guy pushing 35 or so, good shape, healthy looking with tan skin, and probably wearing his best pair of jeans. He was carrying a notebook with a pen shoved into the spiral binding, tools of the trade, and he didn't look like the kind of hard-nosed reporter from the crime beat John had come to know. John Caprelli, my name is Bill Presser. I'm a reporter from the Namaquagan County News in Muskie Falls, Wisconsin. My editor sent me to talk to you. He said you requested me. Caprelli looked up from his hospital bed. He looked drawn and tired. Pain had taken its toll on his usual smiling face. His black curly hair had begun to show threads of silver and plastered to his forehead from the sweats. Tubes and wires were attached everywhere, and a monitor beeped quietly in the background. John Caprelli truly looked like a man on his last legs, with one exception. If you looked close, you could still see his eyes were steeled in grim determination. John answered, his voice shaky but clear. Hey, thanks for coming. I know you're a busy guy. I'm glad you could make it. I think you'll find it worth your time. If not, oh well, it looks like to me you've got a hell of a lot more time left than I do. Presser was cruelly uncomfortable. Even for the most attached, looking at someone who is struggling between life and death is tough. Where do you look? The eyes, the tubes, the wires, the bandage. Presser picked the ceiling and the window. If John chose to die at that moment, it was clear Presser did not want to see it happen. Mr. Presser, it's my hope that we're going to spend a fair amount of time together. Time, again, is the operative word. I may not have much. You need to make eye contact. Get over my current physical appearance and listen to my words. Ask whatever you need to ask so we can get on with this. Try and make yourself as comfortable as possible. Presser looked at John. I understand. I'm sorry. Actually, you look pretty good for all you've been through. That's okay, Bill. I know I look like hell. Wounds like this tend to put you a little off your game. Can I ask what the extent of your injuries are? Sure. I have one bullet still lodged near my spine. I took another one in the kidney, and that's the reason for all the machinery you see plugged into me. They removed one kidney and are hoping the other one will take up the slack. From the sounds of it, I was pretty torn up inside, and the surgeons had their hands full. Mainly, though, I just feel like shit. Getting shot does that to you. But I want you to know that I haven't had my usual dose of pain drugs today, so I can make some sense. Sometimes identifying the elephant in the room is the best way to get something rolling. The straightforward answers from Caprelli in an odd way made Presser feel more comfortable. Well, my big question is, why would you request me? I'm just a jack-of-all-trades reporter from a small-town newspaper. You're a pretty famous guy now, a hero. There are a lot of folks who would kill for this exclusive. Why me? First of all, I'm a little sick and tired of the whole let's try and kill John thing. Secondly, you're honest. You're from Muskie Falls. You write pretty well, and this story for you is a big deal. I need somebody to hear my story who thinks it's a big deal. Make no mistake, though. I am no hero, and never refer to me that way. I have met real heroes, and I don't hold a candle to them. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I appreciate you letting me know what's off limits. I'll try to respect that. I need to say up front that we have no budget to pay you for the story. If your story is anything like it appears, I'm sure one of the tabloids would compensate you very well. Yeah, Laura the lawyer has had a few calls. Being a lawyer with a sharp eye for the bottom line, she's pushing me to take the money. Right now, money is not much of a concern to me. Don't think for a second this story is free. Not a chance. You just aren't paying me with money. Here's my deal. I want you to hear the whole story, start to finish. How I ended up here comes at the end. There's a lot in between. I need you to hear the in-between. Being your life story, a biography? No, just the last couple of years. Do you want me to write a newspaper story or a book? I'm not an author in the book sense. I can recommend a couple of guys from the cities that John cut him off. Look, I'm lying here full of bullets and not full of hydromorphone. According to this doctor who looks like he doesn't shave yet, the clock is ticking. I'm sure he'll be here to harass me as soon as his mother gives him a ride to work. If we're going to start, let's start. Otherwise, on your way out, tell the nurse to bring me drugs. I just don't know. I'd like to think this through. I need some time. Again, let me restate the obvious. Time is what you've got plenty of, not me. We start or you go. I'm not trying to be difficult, but like I said, getting shot makes me very cranky. John, to be honest with you, I'm not sure I can do with your story justice. I wrote about the winners of the Lions Club fishing contest and the Muskie Queen pageant for a small newspaper. There are going to be a lot of people reading this story, people from all over the country. I have never done anything like this before. Well, Bill, if you stick with that chicken shit attitude, it's likely you never will. Here's your chance. Take it or leave her. It's your choice. It's a hell of a story you'd be missing. Bill Presser sat deep in thought. Cabrelli didn't press him. He just waited. It was up to Bill now. Presser finally found his voice. My grandmother was a card player. When we were kids, she used to tell us, know when to hold, know when to be bold. If you're never bold, you'll always be playing someone else's cards for them. I'm guessing she was referring to situations like this. I'm honored you want me to write your story, John. I'll give it my very best. Bill Presser's life changed forever.
Thank you, Jeff. That was excellent. Well, Figure 8 has won the Midwest Book Award this year. What has that experience been like for you?
Well, I'm thrilled. I'm humbled by that. You know, there are a lot of great writers, and I really am just thrilled. And it was a great experience. So, it's probably hard to believe, but I'm not much for formal affairs and black tie events. And because of the virus, they had canceled the official thing and had this virtually. And so we were sitting on the porch of our house watching it and eating popcorn from the local popcorn stand. By the way, Portage has the best popcorn stand in the country. And eating popcorn, and we're just thrilled that they chose Figure 8. You know, and I mean, it just, in everything, whether it's conservation or something else, you know, you put it out there for people to enjoy. I mean, it's really the value of these things is not based on how much money you make, but what it brings to those people around. And when I think about Figure 8 and all the people who have read it and the wonderful letters and emails I've gotten, it makes me very happy, very happy. And so that was a good thing.
Well, congratulations. It's well earned. And I understand that your second book, Spider Lake, is also due out this year. Has it been published yet, Jeff?
Yeah, Spider Lake is out.
Okay.
And we actually, I'm pretty far along in the third book now. But Spider Lake is, let me tell you, I have a friend who's an extraordinary writer. He's a news writer. He always tells me he'd never written anything he really liked. and the rest of the world loves the stuff he writes. And I told him I would never write anything that I didn't like, and I really enjoyed Figure Eight, and I really enjoyed Spider Lake. Spider Lake is tense. I'm going to tell you. People keep telling me, "Oh my goodness!" So, yeah, Spider Lake is out. We, because of the virus and trying to practice some sanity during this time, a lot of the events that were scheduled had to be canceled.
Mm-hmm.
But so Spider Lake is out, and the next book, I'm working on it, and hopefully I'll get it done, and I hope that people will like to read that one too.
So what was your inspiration for Spider Lake?
Rex, I just sat down and started writing it. That's exactly what happened. And this good story but I developed the story as I wrote it. And it's a continuation of John Cabrelli's life in northern Wisconsin. And but again, it's a good story. I really liked it. I just reread them again, and I like it.
So when you started writing Figure Eight, did you intend to write a series?
No. I didn't intend to get a book published. I didn't intend.
Well, you're doing very well for yourself, Jeff.
I didn't intend to send it to a publisher. I just wrote a story for my family to read, and that was Figure Eight.
So will the third book also continue the story?
Oh yeah, it continues on, and I can't tell you, Rex, what's in it because that would ruin it. But they have, but John Cabrelli is in the story, and life continues on in northern Wisconsin. And I love to paint these pictures of the landscape. I've spent so much time in northern Wisconsin and fishing and swimming and snorkeling for treasure and doing all those things. And I just love to test myself to see if I can paint that landscape with words, because it's a lot more difficult than it would seem, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. No, it is. I think anyone that's attempted writing would agree with you there. So what's your motivation to write mystery versus any other genre?
Well, I would have to say, Rex, that's a mystery because I really don't know. It just is exactly the right fit for me. And I do a lot of research and about actual crimes that have been committed or events that have transpired. And I'm fortunate that I can reach out to a lot of people who are friends of mine who will help me understand the actual events that transpired in lots of circumstances. And it's really of interest to me. So I guess the stories are interesting to me. Now, I would like to try something else. And I probably will. But one of my favorite books, probably my favorite book, is a book called Rascal, written by an author from Wisconsin, from Albion, Wisconsin, called Sterling North. I first read it as a kid, and I've read it several times since. And I would like to write a story for kids, a story about the outdoors, a story about life in Wisconsin. So if I get around to it, I'm going to give that a try. But it'll be a mystery anyway, because, kids love mysteries.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, John, you published a book in 2019, or Jeff. Oh, hello, Rex. You published a book in 2019. You published a book in 2020. That's extremely fast. What kind of writing routine do you have?
A writing machine?
No, writing routine.
Routine. Well, I usually sit down on the porch, get the fire going, and just start writing. I don't really, well, just when I feel like writing, I write. And I can, and I enjoy writing it. And you'll probably understand this, especially after I read your book. So I'm telling the tale. I'm enjoying following the plot and taking it through twists and turns.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't wait to get to the next line.
So when you write, do you write the whole first draft without, editing or self-correcting or anything like that?
First two drafts.
The first two, okay.
Yep.
So how many drafts do you typically do?
Well, the last time I think it was 4. And I really want I want the story. When I read the story again, in the first draft, I put all sorts of stuff in there. A friend of mine is a retired FBI agent from Madison who was an ME in Dane County, and I had spent a lot of time talking to him, and I basically put everything in there that he told me. Now, all that won't stay in, but it's got a place in the book, and it's got to be crafted into this, woven into the fabric of this whole text. So then the second time through, which is where I'm at now, I start looking at things. I don't want things that don't make sense. I make notes about things that I'm not sure are correct, and then I make sure that I get them correct. And then my wife will read it, and my barber will read it, and a buddy of mine who runs a garage, his wife will read it, and they'll tell me whether they like it or not. My daughter will read it. And if they like it, then we'll go ahead and start the real process.
Interesting. So roughly each time you're doing 4 drafts. Now, is that 4 drafts before you give it to the publisher, or at some point do you give it to the publisher?
No, it's probably 2 drafts, and then I give it to the publisher.
Oh, okay. So then the last 2 are with the publisher.
Yeah.
Okay. So how much time a day do you spend writing?
Sometimes I can sit down and I can just write for 8 hours.
Wow.
I never ever just sit down and write for 10 minutes. I have a lot of thoughts that go through my mind, and I'm blessed with a good memory, and I incorporate those in the book. And sometimes, just like the other day, I brought up the story and added 2 lines to the front that I thought were important. But no, I sit down and write the story, and so.
Okay. Well, Jeff, I always talk with authors about attracting readers. How do you attract readers to your books?
I've had so much fun with my readers that I can't even tell you. People like Figure 8. And I went around to bookstores and did signings and did events and things like that, and we just had a great time. And so through the work of our publisher and through my wife's very able computer skills, they have done a good job of publicizing the book. And people have bought it, and they've commented back to us, and it's been great. And really, probably the best sales we've had are for word of mouth from people who've read the book. One of our biggest sellers of the book is a bait and tackle shop in Sawyer County, Wisconsin. They sell tons, and they're dear friends of ours. And so that's pretty much it. I think I'm thankful that the readers have decided to read my book.
Sure. Can you share with us your website, please?
Yeah, it's feetwetwriting.com.
And
Feet wet as in wetland.
I've read it, but you have to explain to our audience why you call it Feet Wet.
Well, because it is, we have, regarding our outdoor education efforts with kids getting their feet wet. And actually, there's a picture that's feet wet, and it is one of my greatest accomplishments, the photograph. It's my feet in the water in a pair of LL Bean boots that have been resold at the LL Bean factory 3 times.
Oh my heavens.
So I've worn out that pair of boots 3 times.
You're a hard-working man.
I just walk a lot.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So do you have any advice for listeners who may want to try their hand at writing mystery?
Absolutely. First of all, if you want to try your hand at writing mysteries, sit down and start writing. Everything begins, I'll put it in a wetland context. I was overlooking a wetland project that I was going to do in central Wisconsin at Quincy Bluff. There was a groundbreaking and a ribbon cutting and all that sort of stuff before we started work the next day. The founder of Earth Day was there, Gaylord Nelson, and he asked me, how do you go about restoring a wetland of over 1,000 acres in size? And I thought about that, and my answer was simple: 1 square foot at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is the same way. Until you start putting words on paper, you aren't going to get anywhere. And it doesn't matter whether or not your effort is good. It only matters that you put in your effort. And I think that, I've talked to so many people who say, I've really thought about writing a book. And I always tell them, sit down and start writing a book. Who cares how it turns out? You'll have done it. And that's an accomplishment. The other thing I have for advice is be correct. If you're using technical terms, whether it's law enforcement or anything else, make sure you spend the time to be correct, to get your facts right. Because at least for me, when and I read all the time, at least for me, when I read something that is incorrect, it kind of puts me off on the story. I'm very forgiving, though. But so those would be 2 things that I would suggest.
Excellent advice, Jeff. Excellent advice. Well, we've had a wonderful conversation today, and I appreciate it. I wish you continued success. And do you have a title for the 3rd book yet?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, we will look forward to the untitled continuation of the series.
Thank you very much, Rex. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye. The closing music is by Milwaukee musician, performer, and composer Carrie Sherwood from her CD, Released from the Heart. The song is called Connected. I'd like to remind listeners that while the library is not physically open, and likely will not be for the remainder of 2020, that you can still get books, movies, and CDs. You can participate in book clubs, and there are programs for all age groups. A lot of digital material is on Hoopla, Overdrive, and Libby. To learn about all the resources at the library, please visit www.sunprairielibrary.org for details on various programs. The Sun Radio is underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. My guest on Monday, September 21st, will be Wisconsin author Mary Lang Solinger. Until next time, this is Rex Owens wishing you a creative life.